Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insights from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and today's episode features a guest panel of educators discussing their experiences with teaching music during the coronavirus pandemic. Let's begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Director's Circle. I'm Doug Conrad. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the podcast, make sure to check us out and subscribing to the show on applications like Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music, and iHeartRadio, as well as looking us up on Facebook under Director's Circle and clicking like to stay updated on all news and future episodes with the podcast. You'd be my all-time favorite person. So, like all of you out there, it is currently March 16th as I record this. We're all going through personal and professional changes and adjustments with the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of you are staying at home, and a lot of you in the professional world are also dealing with certain changes, whether you have a delay to your school year or whether you have a complete change of looking at teaching remotely online. So with that said, with a lot of things I've seen on social media posts, especially amongst music education groups through the past 2 weeks, is that there's a lot of frustration of the unknown with this pandemic. And with that, I wanted to try to bring together a panel of rock star music educators to discuss their personal experiences with this. So I've brought together a panel of Mr. Adam Gumble and Dr. Andrew Yozviak from Westchester University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Christopher Cicconi from Towson University in Towson, Maryland, and Dr. Russel Mikkelson from The Ohio State University. This interview was a very special one for me, as it was our first panel interview on the podcast, and also being able to work and gain insight from all of these distinguished educators on how they are working on modifying their instruction and staying positive in such a stressful and difficult time was really influential to me, even in my own teaching practice. So, without further ado, here is our panel interview discussing teaching during the coronavirus pandemic. Hello, everybody, and right now we are starting our first panel interview with the big topic that everyone is very familiar with, COVID-19, otherwise known as coronavirus. So today, here we have a panel of rock star music educators to talk about their own personal experiences of how we are working together on this national pandemic. So to start off, could all of you please talk about and introduce yourself, where you teach, what kind of things you teach, and right now, what is the current status at this point in time of your teaching schedule, whether you're delayed for a few weeks or whether you're teaching remotely for the rest of the school year?
Sure. My name's Russ Mickelson. I'm the director of bands at Ohio State University in Columbus. I conduct the Wind Symphony, teach graduate conducting, and oversee all aspects of the university's band program. We are currently on a delay on online teaching, if you will, for the remainder of the semester. We learned of that during spring break last week, and then spring break was extended this week to get the students out of the dorms and to give faculty a little bit of time to plan for especially teaching online courses that have never been online, which obviously is a challenge for us.
Chris Cicconi, Director of Bands and Orchestras at Towson University, where I conduct the symphonic band, the symphony orchestra, teach conducting classes. I teach secondary methods of instrumental music, which is the class they take right before they go student teach. And in the spring, I observe student teachers. We're starting spring break right now, and we are actually delayed. We're supposed to come back April 6th, but we're in a holding pattern for that.
I'm Andrew Yozviak. I'm the director of bands at Westchester University of Pennsylvania. I conduct the wind ensemble and chamber winds and teach graduate conducting. We were, much like Russ, on spring break last week when we learned of the delay to the school. And the way they have it working at Westchester is we're on a 2-week hiatus. The kids to move out and collect resources, as well as allowing the staff to transition to an online format, collect information for that.
And I'm Adam Gumble. I'm the director of athletic bands at Westchester University of Pennsylvania, and I direct the Golden Rams Marching Band, the 6-man basketball band, the Westchester University Concert Band. I teach undergraduate conducting courses as well as courses in music education. And I have the pleasure of teaching with Andy Yozviak. So we have been on an extended spring break now for a few days, and we have the rest of this week and next week to get ourselves together and begin plans for delivering online content for the remainder of the semester.
Well, I'm really glad to have you guys here. So, speaking of Andy Yozviak, if we could start off with you, Andy, I know especially like a lot of you guys, we were anticipating maybe some adjustments in our teaching schedules, but I especially know with myself as an acting high school band director, it's one of those things where you're anticipating it, you don't know. It's on a day-by-day basis until that official announcement is made. But especially with, I know in the instance of Westchester, rather than like a delayment of spring break, they went straight to remote learning for the remainder of the semester. So, Andy, could you start off, and then for anyone else who wants to chime in about their own personal story, could you talk a little bit about just how you first learned about your school adjustments, and what were your initial reactions to the adjustments of the remainder of your semester?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, it was really just kind of surreal. We did a recording session with the wind ensemble right on the front end of spring break, the 6th through 8th, that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of March, and finished up midday Sunday. Said goodbye to the wind ensemble. We'll see you on Monday the 16th, and get started on our next concert cycle. And 2 days later, phones just start buzzing and what's going on, that kind of thing. And, we get this notice that the university is going to have suspended everything for 2 weeks until March 30th, that the kids are not coming back, that we're going to have an online model for the rest of the semester. And it's just going to kind of roll that way. And I think it was really kind of surprising because the note to the faculty went out at exactly the same time as the students. It went out to everybody at the same time. So we didn't even have like a 2-minute head start for what was going to be coming at us, And my initial response was we just kind of started fielding emails, text, messages from the kids that they went into hair on fire mode. Clearly, I did too. And trying to put out some fires. Obviously, the first people I was in contact were Adam and Greg Martin, our associate director of bands, just to say, hey, what are you hearing? What are you thinking? Let's see if we could gather again tomorrow and after the dust settles a little bit and see what's going on. I think the one thing that was immediately evident was that whatever we were thinking, whatever was going on, the kid toll was exponentially greater than anything that we were thinking about. And like just reading all of their posts and how they're reaching out to us and whatever, they're missing their senior recitals, they're missing the last concerts with any particular group or anything, their fraternity initiations, and that social connection, it really kind of immediately surfaced as the thing that we were going to have to start to deal with, and like figuring out how we're going to administer our classes and those kind of things. Yeah, we'll figure out how to do that. But the kids stuff was a little further in the week. But the thing that when it really hit home for me, so we know all that intellectually. Friday afternoon, I'm waiting to jump on a thing that Adam was going to host the local band directors who were just kind of working through this. And doorbell rings. My 3-year-old runs up to the door. Daddy, I go to the door and there's 2 of my students standing there. One with a bag of pierogies. Now,
first chair.
Yeah. And they said, hey, we just want to stop by and say goodbye. 2 senior wind ensemble kids. And it was like, oh man. you guys. It's tough. So that part is definitely been the worst.
Yeah, that certainly has to be one of the hardest points, especially when you have a lot of those kids that are looking forward to those epic moments like a senior recital and all that kind of stuff. I know for myself, too, where I teach in Pennsylvania, it's one of those things where it was a crazy thing this past week where, I know like Maryland schools announced, I believe, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they announced on Thursday or Friday that starting on Monday of the following week that they were going to have 2 weeks off. So in Pennsylvania, where we are right on the state border, it was one of those kind of things we knew that something's coming, but as teachers, we can't officially announce, hey, be ready for it. So it's one of those things I remember like even talking in my band that, hey, you need to take your instruments home today. Why? Well, just be prepared. Just be prepared. So it's obviously something that was very quick and very upcoming for all of us. So obviously with a lot of the big adjustments and what we're doing, especially probably with public school educators in the upcoming weeks once we learn a little bit more of our long-term scenario, but you guys, it's a little bit more pronounced now, is of course modifying your coursework to be in more of a remote setting to finish out the semester or a elongated break. So Russ, could you start off on talking a little bit on how you are modifying your coursework with the new schedule adjustments and any kind of things that, especially in a performance-based ensemble, that you are working with in these remote learning adjustments?
Absolutely. The lessons are the easy part. The graduate conducting lessons we can do using Zoom, still one-on-one. They can use recordings to conduct to or sing, and that's I think, going to work just fine. My graduate conducting seminar, similarly, we can use Zoom to deal with that. But when we get to the Wind Symphony, it was time to be a little more creative. The first thing that I did was I wrote the band and said, okay, this is your education. I don't want to give you busy work, but we're obviously not going to be able to perform together in 50 or 60 different locations. So I said, think in terms of project-based ideas. And there were about 4 or 5 people that came up with ideas that I liked, and I used some of those. So what I've come up with, at least for the moment, and this is still a work in progress, we start school again next Monday. But the first project, because one of my students said, hey, we're doing the Grand Partita this semester. I'd love to explore harmony music more. So the first project is exploring harmony music and other chamber music for winds. Consists of listening and responding to a core list of pieces, reading articles about those works that I would provide, reflecting on what they've learned, and then also choosing some excerpts so that since it's a performance-based course, I still want them to perform. So choose some excerpts, prepare them, and then submit them to me. So I give them a list of 5 really core repertoire pieces, the Grand Partita since we were working on it, the Dvorak Serenade, Strauss Serenade in E-flat, the Mendelssohn, and the Stravinsky Octet. A second project was professional audition preparation for a military ensemble. So I have found a lot of the Marine Band audition excerpts. They will simply prepare them, use me as a resource to help prepare those. Since I have a group that's graduate students and also some freshmen, it's a really wide group. Some are music ed majors, a lot are performance majors. The third project is using the Wisconsin Comprehensive Musicianship Through Performance model, which I served on that committee when I was teaching public school. So it's a project designed for music educators of middle and high school performing ensembles. So I'll teach them the model, how to apply it, and then have them create a teaching plan using the pieces that they would like to choose. And finally, the last project I call Score Study for the Performer. We always tell our students that they need to listen to one another, but they don't really know what to listen to unless they've done the score study. And they don't have to do study necessarily the way a conductor does. But I've told them this often. Phil Smith, the principal trumpet in the New York Philharmonic, would often create his own trumpet part to core repertoire pieces. And what he would do is he'd put his trumpet one part in the middle, and then above and below would be the important parts in the orchestra that he needed to be listening to when he was playing that particular part. So I'm going to kind of teach them to do this kind of score study so that they're listening is aligned to whatever is most important and relevant to their part. And I'm going to kind of coach them on how to do that, and then they will help kind of provide their own kind of part for some core repertoire piece that they will choose and I will approve.
So with all that said, then also too, obviously aside from what we're doing until the end of the semesters of the school year, but it's also just having the foresight looking at this as it's a situation where there is no definitive timeline of when this will end. And a lot of things that we all do as band directors, obviously having the foresight to plan for that is of the utmost importance, and especially for things like marching band with Adam and a lot of what you do working with such a well-known marching band. Could you talk a little bit about what you're doing now, especially even with your band staff or student leadership, to even gear up and prepare for the upcoming months of what you will be doing next year with your marching band?
Sure. Yeah. It's such everything is so unknown right now. I mean, that's the kind of the craziest part of everything that we are all dealing with, not just band directors or students of music, but everybody. That the timeline, as you said, we're not really sure what we're looking at. 2 days ago in Pennsylvania, it was, hey, we're going to be out for 10 days. And, then it could turn into 10 weeks. Who knows? We're not really sure what it is that we're looking at moving ahead. So we have a lot of students that look at our marching band as something that feels like home. And we want to make sure that they are, that we're giving them opportunities to, when they're not around each other, that we're trying to, give them opportunities to get together in a virtual way. And one of the things that they're doing right now, over the last day or so, they've been engaging each other on social media. They've put together some groups on social media to, that are essentially support groups that are not just for themselves as members of the group now, but also for prospective members who have, lost out on the rest of the, or at least the next couple of weeks of their study at school as part of their home bands. Hey, we know that you don't have a band to play in physically right now, but we're looking at you as a part of our future, and we want to get to know you a little bit better. So hey, post about yourself, show us, tell us what you're excited about, so you can, that we can have some optimism, an optimistic view about what the future is going to look like, even though the present is incredibly turbulent. So seeing those groups, seeing the leadership take control of those groups and really, make it so that folks who are currently members of the band, feel comfortable and feel like there's something that's normal, has been great. And also seeing the folks that are going to be coming on board in the future, that's been great as well. As far as our staff, it's been a really hard time for them as well, because not only has the university, moved to a different format, but also a lot of our staff, we're fortunate to have an amazing team of educators who work with us, and they're also involved in winter guard groups. They're writing, designing, teaching, WGI groups, and those have, I think a day after the university decided that they were going to move in this direction, WGI announced that they were going to be packing it up for the season as well. So they're not only having students dealing with that trauma, but the people who have been investing months and months of their lives putting together these shows and investing in these young people. The disappointment of not getting to see that through is pretty traumatic. So we have people on our staff who produce some of the largest parades and largest public gatherings in this country, and things that folks look forward to that, have been canceled as well as part of this whole thing. So I've been trying to give them a little bit of space, without letting them take care of themselves and their teams the way that they need to be taken care of. But I'm sure that, as we move forward, we'll be engaging in these kind of these kind of online communications. We've used Zoom in the past. We have gotten together virtually and are fairly used to those kind of platforms, Google Docs, and all the great technology that's out there that allows us to collaborate. So we'll surely be using that as we move forward. But here and now, we're really kind of focusing on the immediate need, for those staff members, but also for their students, making sure that they're there, that they are there for them, here in the immediate future.
Yeah, some good points there, Adam. And now I'm going to kind of direct this in, even if all of you guys were to maybe go back to your previous jobs when you taught secondary band. And I'm going to direct this first to Chris and Andy, if you have some input too. Because I know a lot of what we do in performance-based settings, obviously, and Russ had a lot of great ideas on this too. But if you were to go back into specifically being a secondary level director, would the types of assignments you might assign students be a little different? Or would you have, because the thing is with public school educators, we're a little bit more of on maybe a mixed schedule right now where we do have some remote teaching potentially here in the near future, depending on certain announcements that might be made, but also then maybe returning to the classroom before June graduation dates. So with that said, Chris, is there anything, if you were to take a step back into your public school teaching days that you would maybe, if you had to go back to teaching next week, that you would assign students, or would it be similar to what you're doing with your students at Towson? And if so, what would those types of things be?
That's a hard question. First, if I can go back to a previous question, one of the things that when I found out that we would no longer have classes, I found out the day of our Chamberwinds concert, and it got canceled that evening. And so I initiated this program at TU because there was not really a Chamberwinds program. To do sort of these masterworks for Chamberwinds, and we had all these. We actually had a Westchester graduate student. We were premiering his saxophone sextet at this performance, and so as much as it was upsetting that it happened the day of the concert, the kids were devastated. And one of the things that I've worked on as a high school band director and as a collegiate band director is the culture within the environment that I surround myself with. And so the first thing I would honestly do as a high school director or as a collegiate, and I did as a collegiate director, was reach out to all my kids and just sort of empathize with them and connect with them individually. I sent a mass email out saying this and that and following up with university protocol, but then I also emailed every single one of my kids in all of my groups. Just to check in, and so they got that. It's important to me that they got that individualized attention. The thing that's hard for me, and this happened to me in Florida when I was down there as a high school band director too, because we had a hurricane come through, and so we were kind of in a holding pattern. But I'm in limbo right now a little bit with the fact that we're not sure if we're coming back, and if we're not coming back, I haven't given them a whole lot of direction right now, because it's their spring break and I'm not trying to wreck that yet. So, and it also depends on the class. So with the things that I currently teach, I haven't started observing my student teachers yet. That's supposed to start in April. So I haven't crossed that bridge yet. As far as conducting in those things are concerned, and Dr. Mickelson said a lot of those things too. A lot of that has been Zoom and individualized videos and things like that. But if I can go back to being when I was a 7 taught high school, I did a few different things. So as an ensemble director, I conducted we called it the symphonic band, and we lost some time due to a hurricane coming through. So I set up a Dropbox file for the kids, and every kid had their own folder within this file. And depending on, I'm trying to remember what the music that we were doing. I can't remember what the music was. We were doing Russian Christmas music for a concert that year. And so every kid had their own Dropbox link, and I actually assigned them and asked them to upload audio recordings of them playing. Here's rehearsal 1 to rehearsal whatever. And then the next time that we were supposed to meet, they would pick up at that rehearsal. And so they would submit recordings. And a lot of it was on the honor system, because there's nothing that would say, hey, this is my friend actually playing this. And so it was sort of that, because it wasn't on Smart Music, and I used Smart Music with my younger groups, which was an easy way to assess their progress as they were out. And so I did that with my older group. I also taught music technology, and so that was pretty easy. Where at that point we were discussing things like Audacity and GarageBand, and so I would send them recordings of their actual excerpts that they submitted. I would send them back, and I would ask them to go in and edit their tape, for example, as opposed to just doing something off the cuff. The other thing too is then I got a little bit more fun, where I would have them take their opening to Russian Christmas music and put some kind of Apple loop to it, which kind of made it really fun. And the kids got a kick out of that. The other class that I taught was AP Music Theory, which lends itself pretty well, except the ear training and the piano piece that I did with that. And so I would do things like this, where I would hold group sessions, where I would do Google Hangout, and I would go over the kids' intervals, or we would do dictation through that, and then they would submit that through what did we use? We used Noteflight, and so I can track their progress on Noteflight, and they would submit that to me in virtual time, so I could make sure that it wasn't one of those things where I sent them the recording and they had 4 days to figure it out. We did it all right there. And then what was it? Oh, and sight singing. I had them send me. That was fun. I had them send me through the same Dropbox, but for a different class. They would send me their sight singing examples through that too. So as far as a 7, I did do a few private lessons, because it was a unique school that I taught in. It was a private school down in South Florida, and so I did teach a few private lessons here and there where the kids I was responsible for giving them a grade, and so it would be the same sort of electronic submission for that.
Yeah, some good points there, Chris. And Andy, I know especially with your background in as a composer, in addition to conducting, especially with certain things you've done, do you have any input on those types of things you might utilize, or things that you are planning to utilize with your students at WCU?
The conversations that we had just with the kids, it was the email. It's like, all right, let's do a Zoom thing. It's going to be at this time on this day. Anybody who could jump in. And there were similar kind of responses to what Russ indicated. I was surprised with the things that they were interested in learning about and doing it. What do you want to do a deep dive into? If we're going to devote a unit or whatever. And it kind of surprised me. And there wasn't a whole lot of that really came out of it. I think that the conductors at Westchester are probably going to team up and kind of divide and conquer some of these lessons. It was like a score study lesson or a listening lesson, or pick a general thing that we're going to be able to administer to a bunch of different ensembles, so that multiple groups of students are going to get the same experiences.
So with that said then too, obviously with a lot of things, and this could all change tomorrow, as we know, things change day to day, but just in the past 2 days, I believe the CDC has recently recommended canceling in-person events of audiences or crowds of over 50 people for the next 8 weeks. And obviously with some of you guys, especially if you have remote learning until the end of the semester, but to where you might have a concert in May, or especially myself as a high school band director, where we do have that May concert, or all those types of events of even say like graduation, it can really play into decisions that have to be made about, do we have concerts or what do we do? But obviously with the forefront of what we do is offering students meaningful experiences through their music making. Do you have, and we'll go ahead and start with Andy again, but do you have any recommendations or ideas aside from maybe a traditional concert, so to say, where everyone comes, due to that number of people. Are there alternative ways to have students perform and share their music making with others, so that if we're not able to have per se the traditional concert experience, ways that students can still share their music with the greater masses?
Yeah, we have the things you're missing out on. We were supposed to do a performance at our MEA at the end of April, and that was one of the things that the kids noted as really going to be missing out on. And I said, all right, well, let's figure out what we could do with that. So one of the pieces we were preparing to perform was Jim Stevenson's Second Symphony, and he was just out and spent some time with the kids, and got to have a little bit of a bond. And one of the things that came up in the conversation with the students was, all right, can we have figure out some kind of big project that is going to continue our study on that piece, direct a little bit of creativity towards something that we can do on the day of that performance. Because the way it worked at our place was our school canceled everything. We weren't coming back. I had to write PMEA and say, hey, we're not going to be able to come out. Only about 2 hours ago did the state conference actually, throw up its flag and say, we're not going to be able to host the conference. But we're supposed to perform at 3:00 on Friday, April 24th. And, between a couple things that I threw at him as seeds and a whole lot of input that they had, we are going to have some project that is going to drop at 3:00 on Friday, April 24th. That involves that piece and our students and the preparation they've been doing and how active they have continued to be throughout the rest of the semester. So it just makes me very proud, of them for just saying, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And it's like scribbling, like a kindergartner trying to keep up with them. It's awesome. But I think it's also important that for us as a university, we continue to portray the confidence that, this is a blow, but we're ready for it. We're going to be able to handle it. And what these kids are doing is this and this, these little pop outs every now and then, but we don't want to ever have anybody think, nor would we want to give our students the experience that, this is just too much for us and we're going to go belly up. We're musicians. We spend our whole life battling against adversity.
Yeah, good point. And I know, especially with myself, I might be looking at a situation where I return to work in 2 weeks, or possibly even longer. And with our concert, it's in the first week of May, and it's even one of those things where if we're physically able in school, physically able to perform, I don't know what our options are looking at yet. Whether we do, I know like a live stream of a concert, because I even know a couple years ago, Travis Weller from Messiah College actually was in a situation where I believe he was in some PMEA district band, but they were actually doing the festival, and it was supposed to be on the Saturday of the concert where it was some big snowstorm. So the Friday before, I believe what they did was something along the lines of like a remote live stream of the concert. So there's definitely some options. I'm trying to look in with that too. But it's one of those other things where trying to look into alternative ways to share that music making can be very difficult in that long run. So with that then said too, while the future remains uncertain with this pandemic, obviously a lot of this, especially for a lot of people, if they have today off or they're working remotely, there's a lot of time to go on social media. And the biggest thing you'll see especially is a lot of worries, a lot of frustrations of the unknown. And I think it's one of our biggest things, especially to remain as educators and advocates, is remaining positive in this situation. And to speak on that a little bit, if we could start, with Adam, I especially know when this news first came out of your adjustments to remote learning, you had a very influential and almost viral, if you will, post on your Facebook account, which talked about making the most of the situation. So for all of you, if you could start, and we'll start with Adam, what advice would you have to teachers to make the best out of the situation and remain with a positive mindset?
Yeah, I mean, it's the unknown is scary. And, I think that you're always going to be better off approaching any situation with, a positive outlook if you can. And, negative mindsets see challenge. I think I might've said this online, but, negative mindsets see challenge in every opportunity, where positive mindsets see opportunity in every challenge. And it's really hard to see that sometimes when every event in the world is being canceled and we're being told to stay in our homes for who knows how long. It can be a real challenge to look at things, as opportunity. But I think that what you just said is really important to acknowledge. The fact that there are going to be new approaches to teaching and learning. That's a positive that we need to embrace for sure. The fact that we have, we never have enough time. We say it every rehearsal's never long enough. If I only had one more rehearsal, time is the most precious of all resources. We never get it back. But now, if you want to look at it from a positive mind, hey, now we have a little bit of time where we can, we take a little time now to regroup and think through the potential of the situation and what this could do for us, as a community moving forward. And then you can start to feel some optimism, and feel some hope. Whereas if you look at it like, oh, now we don't have any time, the time has been taken away. Well, okay, then there's really there's nowhere to go. It can be pretty depressing. So I think that, as we look at this, we kind of need to ask ourselves the question of how we're going to use the time. That to me is the opportunity here. We have an opportunity to engage and inspire students in ways that we haven't thought about before. We've been doing it the same way for a long time, and it's a great way to do it. We can't do it any other way. Yoz and I were on a call last week. We got about a dozen students together to try to experiment with live music making, not live music making, but actually creating an ensemble via Zoom. And it was, I think Yoz said today, to say that it was it was a failure would be putting it lightly. It was fun to get people together and to experiment a little bit, but it didn't work. Like we really couldn't make it happen. We got on Zoom, we got on Skype, we got on Facebook, and finally we said, hey, look, we are not good. For us, we're kidding ourselves if we think we're going to be able to make this work the way that it's been working. It's impossible. And to me, that's a positive thing too. As we come out on the other side of this, whatever this is, we're going to make the best of it. We're going to come up with new ways to do some things that'll probably be advantageous to us moving forward. But it's also going to allow us to value and not take for granted the fact that we do have the opportunity to make music together, live and in person, in the same space. So, that is, to me, that's a positive mindset. If we can look at this as, these things are being taken away and we can't devalue that. That's a reality, and that is sad for sure. And you can't replace it. But we can look at ways to get through it together and make sure that we all understand what a gift we have and that we get to make music together, live and in person. So anyway, yeah. And hopefully, if nothing else, we use it as an opportunity to demonstrate to our students that being flexible is incredibly important, and making sure that we are able to adapt to whatever circumstances come to us. As Yoz said before, we're musicians, we're resilient. We'll figure out a way to make it happen in a world that's changing by the moment.
Good points there. And with one of those things, especially, trying to wrangle up all of the emotions that are tied into this type of situation, for those of us that will be returning potentially to work face-to-face with students. And Russ, I'm going to direct this question to you because I know for myself, whenever the day comes that I see my students again in the classroom, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of cobwebs maybe to dust off, or just a lot of feelings to process with kids as we go back into this with not just what's in our band room, but also out throughout the world right now. So, Russ, if you could talk a little bit just about whenever, when you potentially come back to work with your students, what types of things are you going to do on that first day of rehearsal?
Well, the first thing I think we're going to do is take the opportunity to be grateful for the opportunity to come back together. We don't always remember, especially this time of year, what it is that we have and have had all year until it's taken away from us. And I think Adam was kind of saying the same type of thing, that this kind of reinvigorates our value of the opportunity to come together and make music together. There's a lot of things we can do with technology. That's not one of them. It just isn't. So I think fostering a grateful heart and commending them for their flexibility over this time when we see this thing that's bigger than us that can be so hard to process as a young person. I think it's always good for them to go, gosh, there are things that I can't control and I need to be able to deal with that. And one of the ways I can deal with that is to be flexible and to be creative and to be grateful. And then after that, we're going to make music together. And we're going to pull out Salvation is Created, and we're going to pull out pieces that speak to who we are as musicians and as people to inspire the soul, because we will have missed that for a couple of months. And I have a sense that's going to be a real emotional time. A piece like Salvation, a piece like, Enigma Variations, the Nimrod, things like that just speak to us on a deep level. I think that's the kind of thing that I know my students will want to experience and have happen when we come back together. Still crossing our fingers for commencement. We'll see if that happens or not. If not, I'm going to see them in the fall. I do want to circle back to, I was thinking about this question about what would you do if you were a 7 through 12 band director again? And one of the things that I think I would consider is that if we are going to be able to come back and have a concert, say the end of May, I'm discovering things about Zoom that I didn't know before. And one of the things is that you can do breakout sessions. And I'm thinking, okay, let's have our students learn their parts to one of the pieces that we want to perform. And then let's have a little sectional. We'll have the saxophones go in a breakout session. And okay, one player at a time will play, but the other 3 or 4 can provide feedback for those students. And then we can connect in that way. Maybe we can't play together, but we can be together virtually, and we can provide feedback for one another. And I like that idea. I think I'm going to use some of that actually over the next few weeks of my own students.
Yeah, really good point. And especially now with Chris, I know, and like many of you guys are probably out on the road doing a lot of guest conducting a lot, especially out this time of the year. But I know, Chris, a lot of, especially of what you do in our state of Maryland here is really with your outreach in schools and even aside from what you do at the university. So even if you could talk about, like, let's say if school's back in session in 3 weeks and you're going to go out to someone's band room to maybe do a clinic with some students, and a lot of those kids are probably still going to have some wear off this break of concerns or thoughts or just getting back into the swing of things. How might you interact with those kids in just getting back into the swing, or what might you even do with your kids back at Towson once things are back in the system?
Oh, well, what Dr. Mikkelson said was perfect as far as what I would do if I get to see my kids again in April. And I know that's been a big thing. And before I get to that, if I could circle back to one thing too about maintaining a positive attitude, I think we can't for me personally, and this is a big part of my teaching, checking on them and reaching them as a musicians, but for myself, not forgetting to check on them as human beings, and as people. I mean, my kids and all of our kids come from a very diverse set of backgrounds, from all over the state of Maryland. For example, for mine, that are in the counties in Maryland are vastly different into where they're coming from, and so I'm constantly checking on them as young people, as young adults, and then going on to the music part of it. I think that's an important part of who I am as a teacher, and trying to reach my kids, knowing that I care about them, in that they do have a place, or they do have someone also that they can speak to. If I'm going out, let's say Towson's out for the rest of the year, and I'm going out to do a clinic, because I can tell you if school's out for the rest of the year, but let's say Maryland goes back in April, the kind of teacher I can't not be around music, and so I will amp that up to the nth degree, and really enjoy my time out working with high school, middle school, maybe elementary school. Let's just stick with middle school and high school, but also catching the vibe and feeling the sort of atmosphere that's in the classroom, anywhere from how the kids walk in, how they sit down, what is the feeling of the room, and playing off of that feeling. If there's sort of an anxious feel, there's nothing wrong with stopping in the middle or before that rehearsal, and just coming down to the level and checking in with those kids and seeing how they're doing. I guess as long as it's okay with the director that's in that room. But I've pulled the rehearsal back a lot before when I've gone out to work with kids, like before assessments and things like that, and be like, so, what are we feeling? Like, how are we doing? And I do that with my own ensembles too, where I remember I was in an orchestra rehearsal last semester, and the tension in the room was just as tight as a knot. And I can see that happening. And I stopped the rehearsal. I got off the podium, I moved the music stand, and I walked in the ensemble throughout all the sections and everything. I'm like, what's going on? Like, how are you feeling? What's going through your mind right now? And once a few kids started opening up and they realized that it was a nice sounding board for them to sort of talk to, or for someone to talk to, then things started winding down a little bit, and the comfort level and the anxiety level of the room lessened a lot. And then we jumped back into rehearsal, and things they move straight from there. And so as far as me getting back into a classroom, I would feel sort of like the vibe of the room, and then move my teaching in that direction. If it were my students, my Towson students, I know them very well, and so I would take that same approach, pretty much verbatim that Dr. Mickelson said, and talk about how grateful we are to be together, and not to take these kind of up. And I do it all the time. I tell them every day, I don't take a second that I'm in front of them for granted, because I don't know how much more of that time we'll have. And here's a prime example of, like, we're out of that time right now. And the kids feel it. And I get a lot of, emails and Facebook messages and everything like that. And it's important that they know that I'm there with them. But I would take his approach right there. But Salvation is Created is a perfect thing. I would probably do Irish Tune as well.
Yeah, it's great. The tune adjustment too, or a tune addition, I should say, too, Chris. And so specifically, in the case of Adam and Andy, where some of your students you might not see in the classroom setting for the remainder of the school year. As you said, some might have seen recitals, or some are set to graduate in the spring. But let's say for your returning students, and this will be more in the setting of after you've done placement auditions, or maybe that first band camp meeting, where Adam, you might be in your first basics block, or Andy, once you are officially in your first rehearsal with your top wind band. What kind of things are you going to do, especially with that long break for you guys looking up until maybe September or August? What are you going to try to do in that first session, or what would you maybe say to students?
Well, again, going back to if I were a public school educator right now, what I would be thinking about would be making sure that every kid continues to be connected, that we continue the connection, even if we can't be in the same physical space. And however we need to do that, whatever that ends up looking like, I don't think I don't really know what that looks like right now. Or, we got Facebook, like I talked about before, we've got the Zoom thing, we got all these different ways of staying connected. So we're gonna try to make sure that everybody feels like they're part of that family, even when we're not in the same physical space. And we're going to feel great once we're finally back together again. And I'm sure that everybody is going to be incredibly excited to make that happen whenever that happens. But I guess one of my goals would be to make it feel almost normal, because we have remained connected throughout the process, and that those students feel, if I could say anything to any public school, to any educator anywhere, it's just make sure that everybody knows how much you care right here, right now, so they understand that they're supported throughout this process. And then hopefully when we get back together, hey, good to see you all in person. Let's hug it out. Let's do our thing. And now let's get down to work. So everybody knows what the goals are. Everybody is excited to be back, and let's harness that enthusiasm and do something better than we ever done before. That would be my goal.
Rams up. I like that. So Andy, do you have any input on that if we were in your top win band in September?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll do is just tell them how glad I am to see them. This is I felt like I've been in a little bit of a musical desert this whole year. I was on sabbatical in the fall. I just got back.
Welcome back.
They teased me with this 7 weeks of outstanding music making, and then this kind of comes up. So yeah, I'm just probably going to tell them how glad I am to see them, and I'm with Russ and Chris. Just pull out some music that's really going to allow us to sound and emote and make some real big sounds and have a nice cry together. One of the things the kids said in their feedback was, well, if this all passes once the school year's over, is there any option for us to get together in the summer? I think we're going to have the biggest cohort for our conducting symposium we've ever had this summer. So if that goes down, they'll be jonesing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I especially know, even with my students, it was really interesting because we actually had an hour and a half longer period than usual on Friday of this past week. Whenever Pennsylvania announced starting next week, it's 2 weeks off for everybody. And I remember with my students, we got a lot of work done. We even did things like the yearbook photo and all that kind of stuff. But it was really interesting because we actually had our local music store road rep come in probably our last 15 minutes of rehearsal, drop off a new piece of music, and it's a piece by Naoya Wada. And I remember just talking to the kids about just especially with what we do, carrying the highest significance and one of the most authentic forms of beauty in the world. I even talked to them about, because the night before was the night that the Philadelphia Orchestra had played. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was Beethoven 5 and 6, and just to a bare audience. And I talked to them just about even though it was just kind of mystifying, seeing the camera pull back to the entire auditorium of no one in the audience, but still just how that even with the beauty of that music, it can really touch many people around the world. And just trying to talk to them about obviously, and I was just trying to keep it real of just saying, hey, we don't know what's in the future, but obviously something may be coming up. And it was really interesting just because I literally was handing out the music as they were walking out the door and saying, I'm even looking forward to hearing this in our first real sight reading session as we walk out. So that's something I personally am looking forward to doing when we're getting back. So with this said then, obviously, and this can kind of tie into what we talked about with, just looking at this with a positive mindset and getting through this all together to the best we can with the resources we have at hand. If you were to say anything to students or even to educators to maybe take away from this situation, what would that be? And we're going to go ahead and start with Russ.
I go back to what I said before. I think that this is a time to be grateful. to come together and realize that what we do in a community. And there's nothing like making music with others. We can play a solo instrument, but even that is an attempt to communicate by the composer to that soloist. Music is a communicative art, and we need to communicate with one another. And when we don't get to do that, we feel mournful. I think it's amazing that a lot of companies and people have stepped up in this time to do what they can to try to fill that void. And one, I think, amazing thing, I've been a subscriber for a long time to the Berlin Philharmonic's digital concert hall, which has just archived hundreds of concerts by that amazing orchestra. And they are offering that for free during this time. No subscription necessary. I would ask our students and our teachers and people who are not teachers of music to take advantage of that. I know at a lot of our universities we have a subscription, but this is open now to anyone. And I think it's amazing that the Berlin Philharmonic has seen fit to do that. And there are lots of other companies that are doing things that are just magnanimous and philanthropic. So I appreciate that very, very much at this just amazing time.
Yeah, good point there. And one of the biggest things I know I'm taking away too is, especially acknowledging with our very noble profession, is just the amount of community that is really there. Because especially within the past 2 weeks, as we were looking forward, anticipating this pandemic, especially as you know, if you see like a lot on social media groups and all the things alike, even just people sharing resources or new pages or new projects or apps that they have as well. And that is one of the biggest things I really took away too. Not even just in the art of music, but in the profession of music education, just how much everyone really comes together. And it's really great that all of us came here too. And with that then said, I would like to again thank you all and for having this conversation and just taking the time to do this. I know a lot of people are out there looking at what comes next, and certainly all of us together, within the upcoming weeks, things could change a lot. Things could have a really dramatic influx of how it goes. So with that said, I'd like to thank you again for joining, and all the best on your remaining semesters.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Toad.
This concludes our episode. Many thanks to Dr. Russel Mikkelson, Dr. Andrew Yozviak, Dr. Christopher Cicconi, and Mr. Adam Gumble for sharing their time, wisdom, and insight on ways to teach music through the coronavirus pandemic. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in to the next edition of Director's Circle.